The order is going to be K, and then case is going to be on the link debate, and I'll be doing mostly links here, although I'll be going a little bit on solvency in that section. The alternative solves the entirety of the case with the net benefit of the K. 3 reasons. First, the K outweighs K. They've conceded throughout the round that you should prefer high probability impacts within the round, and that our real-world impacts through empirics are better than their overhyped scenarios. And second, the alternative solves the entirety of the case. By creating a global cosmopolitan society, we can allow for global commitment to try to solve for problems without basing on nationalist competition. And three, they conceded the Beck-Schneider evidence, which says that their risk scenarios are based on cherry-picked nationalist evidence. Now onto the line volume. First, onto the link debate. First, on the nuclear safety flow. We have two links on the nuclear safety flow. Both weren't answered until the 1AR. It's too late for them to bring up new arguments in the 1AR, but I'll go ahead and answer them. Our QETA evidence says that energy security leads to military intervention, that when you try to use overhyped rhetoric in the way you try to secure energy, it leads to military intervention. We can see this through empirics, such as in the war in Iraq, where the Middle East has become a major scenario so that we can get oil. That's from our Curry evidence from the 1NC. The only arguments they really make against this is they say that QETA is talking about scarce energy and nuclear energy isn't scarce. However, they misinterpret what the QETA evidence saying. QETA says that the idea that the United States perceives energy itself as scarce, and thus it actually applies because we're attempting to try to attain this scarce resource, so it still is going to apply, and even if they win this, nuclear energy is still scarce because we don't have much of it. Now on to the proliferation flow. On the proliferation, they kicked out of proliferation and said they weren't going for it. However, there's still a link to the flow. They specifically said in their impacts in the 1AC that without proliferation, nuclear weapons will eradicate everything that breathes and drive the final blow to human civilization. That sort of threat rhetoric leads to military intervention in order to try to prevent some sort of extinction, and even if they say they're not going for it, that sort of discourse still exists from the 1AC Speech Act, and they're kicking out of it just further proves the fact that there's a link to the way they calculate their impacts and the way that they overhype their impacts in order to motivate action that can lead to military intervention. Now on to the desalinization flow. On desalinization, there wasn't a specific link to desal. However, we had a solvency argument that hasn't been answered. It's that there's no reason why nuclear energy is actually going to be able to solve for desalinization. The 1AC never gives any evidence that cites that they're going to make it cost competitive enough to reduce prices that people can actually get desalinated water. There's no reason, if people can't get water now by buying like bottled waters, that there's no reason why they're going to be able to get to it if there's nuclear desalinization. The only evidence they even have that maybe touches on this says that nuclear desalinization is efficient, but it doesn't say it's going to actually solve for water scarcity. Now onto the line by line in the K. Okay, on the K, first on the impact debate, extend the probability of our impacts is the largest, and therefore you should vote on probability of impacts. The only argument they really have on this comes out of the 2AC, and their Bostrom evidence says existential risk should come first. However, in the 1AR, they don't address any of the indites I give their Bostrom evidence. First, they say that Bostrom isn't qualified because he's a professor, and while professors can weigh like the value of life, Bostrom isn't qualified to be making arguments about what the risk assessment of making risk assessment of existential risk. And I said second, to further demonstrate this, Bostrom's article actually in the ununderlined section lives a litany of other existential risks. For example, he says, what if it says, for example, what if we have a we all live in a computer simulation that gets shut down? This sort of threat rhetoric that he evaluates existential risk just with his list of existential risks without measuring the probability is a bad way to calculate probability because it leads to us addressing scenarios that don't actually occur. Our Crary evidence that talks about military intervention in other countries because of security logic talks about real-world scenarios and how during the war in Iraq we actually went in and did things because of our desire to get oil and because of our energy security. And that's we can see that in the real world. You should prefer our real world impacts. That means if we win any of the links, that we should win this debate because there's no offense on the alternative coming out of the 1AR. That means there's nothing wrong. There's no bad effect that can happen according to the 1AR, and they've conceded that the impacts of the links are worse than the affirmative, and so therefore, if we win the links, we should win the debate. Now onto the alternative debate. Okay, first, they make a major mistake in the 1AR by not addressing any of the offense they gave against the alt in the 2AC. The only argument they make is the permutation. There's three reasons why you should still vote in the alt. First, the alternative solves the entirety of the app. As we discussed throughout the debate, they haven't really answered it that by having a global cosmopolitan society, we're better able to address the problems. Our Booth evidence in the 1NC specifically says that proliferation and problems with energy security can't be addressed by national-based initiatives because there's still going to be nation-state competition, and you must address it through a global cosmopolitan cosmopolitan society through a single institution. Second, their own cross-applied their own offense that was made in the 2AC against the alternative to the permutation. The permutation evidence they read in the 1AR says that the permutation is going to solve best because it won't have to create a new institution. It will allow for nation states to enact global initiatives. However, the evidence they read in the 2AC said that we need a new institution in order to prevent violence. That without a new institution, we will have violence as a result of a shift to the alternative. We said in the block that we actually solve for this because we create a new institution through a global government, so we solve better, and it's often to get the permutation. So at the end, you should vote on this debate negative because we outweigh in the alternative solves for the entirety of the affirmative.